well. So I appreciate you all coming out on a weeknight during the holiday season to spend a little time and hopefully get to know me and I get to know you. I first ran for office in 2010 because I got mad. I ran a large nonprofit organization, Crystal Stairs, if you're familiar with it, one of the largest child development agencies in the country. And I went to Sacramento to a budget hearing because the legislature was proposing to cut $1 billion out of child care. And based on the work I did every day, I knew what that would do to working families. I knew what that would do to children who need support in being school ready. And I sat there in the budget hearing and I watched a budget subcommittee comprised of no one from LA County, when LA County has 1/3 of the state's children, and they made that decision. And I got mad and made the perhaps irrational decision right then and there that I was going to run for the state assembly. And 2 years later, I was in the state assembly and I was chairwoman of that same budget subcommittee. The speaker made me chairwoman of that budget subcommittee. And my 12 years in the legislature, it took me almost every minute of that. We put that $1 billion they cut from subsidized child care back into the budget. Now, those 2- and 3-year-olds that didn't have a slot in child care during those years, they don't get do-overs. But we worked very hard to make sure that every child in California, and for me, LA County, has access to the resources they need to be successful. And early care and education is really important. So that's what got me into elected office. Had the privilege of serving in the legislature, the assembly, the Senate, ultimately became chair of the budget committee, and tried to bring my life experience working on behalf of families who needed child care help to the policy making arena and the budget making arena every day. This opportunity came up thanks to term limits. And I thought, well, the issues that I'm most passionate about, the policy issues that really drive me, they're based really in the county. So this is an opportunity to come home full time, because that trek back and forth weekly gets old. So it was an opportunity to come home, and I jumped at that opportunity and was elected to the board in 2020. So I'm a COVID baby. We continue to meet remotely. I became chair of the board last year because the chairwomanship is on a rotation basis and District 2 was up. I became chair last December and spent the greater part of this year managing how the county spends its American Rescue Plan dollars and getting us back in the hearing room. And so when my new colleague was elected and joined us just this Tuesday, Lindsay Horvath, who represents the 3rd District, and Janice Hahn became chair, we were back in the hearing room with about 200 people. It took us several months to get there, but I'm glad that we are back, continuing to be safe to try to make sure that we can continue to have those opportunities. So I appreciate the invitation, appreciate your organization skills, that I had some questions that people wanted to talk about, so I'll include those in some of my opening remarks. But really just wanted to spend some time making sure you got to know me, how I got to the county. The front page today's LA Times, top of the fold. It's a great headline that really talks about the power and the uniqueness of the LA County Board of Supervisors. And how that power can be yielded to help, quite frankly, the least among us. And the issue that I know is front of mind for me every day, and I'm assuming same with you, is addressing the issues facing our unhoused family, friends, and neighbors, because quite frankly, that's who they are, quite frankly. They're people who come from our communities and for a variety of reasons don't have housing. Unincorporated communities, many of the communities in the 2nd District are struggling with not only encampments, but RVs. The RV encampments are some of the most challenging to manage. As I have met with the nonprofit groups and our own Department of Mental Health groups and public health department groups who go tent to tent, RV to RV to really talk to people. They're the most difficult to manage because they've like, well, I've got a place. You're asking me to give up a place to go into temporary housing where I might have a 30 or 60 day time frame. So we're working really hard to manage that, to figure out where to park them safely, how to transition people into appropriate for them housing. And I emphasize that because if you're a single mother of two, if you are a family, if you are a senior, if you are unhoused with a pet and you want to keep your pet, those are all unique circumstances we find when we interview people in the encampments. And we're trying to match them with housing so they'll stay housed. Far too many people who we connect with who are unhoused have cycled in and out of housing programs, but it doesn't stick. And in my opinion, in many instances, it's because we're not matching them with housing that meets their unique needs. We're asking people to go to shelters. Women will tell you, shelters aren't safe for women. I don't want to sleep in a dormitory type setting. People with pets, they don't want to be in a place that doesn't allow pets. So we're trying to be creative, the collective we, state, every level of government, in building settings that meets the needs of our unhoused today. This year we passed a motion because the RVs for the county have just, we are overwhelmed. We are overwhelmed because a number of the 88 cities in LA have passed ordinances preventing RV parking. So it's the unincorporated communities where people gravitate to. So the county needed a policy. So we've got a 3-year pilot working collaboratively with LASA, Public Works, Mental Health, the Sheriff's Department host teams. The goal is to touch 500 people, to get them into housing, and to remove from the RV stock 900 RVs. The problems we're finding is you get a person housed, someone else moves into the RVs. And you've seen the RVs, the vast majority of them are inoperable. I have learned in this last year or two that there really is this kind of underground economy in terms of who owns the RVs, and they're renting them to people. And in many instances, when you see the RVs burned, it's because they didn't pay their rent, and so they get burned out. And so working with acknowledging the environmental challenges of removing those RVs from the stock, it's challenging. So I'm very excited about this pilot. Again, the goal is to house at least 500, get 900 RVs kind of out of commission, and continue to support the continued expansion and building of shelters, permanent supportive housing, the array of housing models that Angelenos need. Moving on quickly with regard to law enforcement, our new sheriff came to the board meeting Tuesday, and I said to him, welcome. I wanted him to be clear that none of us ran to be sheriff. I ran to be a member of the Board of Supervisors, not to be sheriff. So it was never my intention to do his job. But it is important that we have a collaborative relationship. As the board, we do establish the budget like we do for every other county department. Library, public health, Department of Mental Health. And it's the sheriff's job, like any other department head, to manage the budget. So that is where we've had some of the conflict with his predecessor. This notion that, and his public suggestions that it was the board that cut his budget, that there was a hiring freeze. And I think in your packet, we included a fact sheet from the county CEO, really clarifying kind of, where the county is with regard to the budget. So I'm really hoping with the new sheriff that there can be a more direct line of communication and real clarity. There is no hiring freeze in the sheriff's department. There are issues with the previous sheriff's management of overtime hours. There were issues with the number of academies that we funded, but there also weren't full academy classes in the last couple of years. So I am hoping that all of us as county residents will no longer have to read or hear about this headbutting between the sheriff and the board, and I can do my job, the sheriff can do his job. We can talk about the needs of the department, we can talk about the needs of communities and moving forward. I'm sure you all have heard, because this predates my arrival to the board, that the board voted on really shifting to a care first, jails last culture. And that's really impacting the order, if you will, of our investments. I think the pendulum swung statewide so far in one direction that all of the monies were spent on the back end, on policing, on housing, as opposed to any equal investment on prevention, on supporting people prior to their initial interaction with law enforcement. And so again, this was a decision the board made prior to my election in 2020. And so how does that manifest? That manifests in community-based investments. That's manifesting in job training, creating opportunities, particularly for the juveniles in our probation department, to get their GEDs, get high school educations, go through building trade, job training opportunities so they can be gainfully employed. We're really looking at the treatment of our young people through probation in juvenile hall and the camps, because this whole notion of this school to prison pipeline is real, and I think we're trying to interrupt that and create different kinds of opportunities for the young people in our community, and invest our public safety dollars differently, to have a broader conversation, because when you talk about the term public safety, it means different things to different communities within my own district. There are segments of my community who don't have a healthy relationship with law enforcement. They feel and experience and live in communities that are over-policed. And so really trying to create policies that meet the unique needs of LA County as a whole. That's what our goal is and what we aim to do. I think, and the fact sheet you have, it should show you, for example, it may be more information than you want, but I am a budget wonk, so I'll confess. It will, show you the county funding for the sheriff's department. And again, from my perspective, the sheriff is a department head like others are, and he has a responsibility to manage his budget appropriately. So I think I'll wrap there, because I don't want this just to be a talking head kind of experience. I know you sent me some questions. I think the fact sheets that we shared with you tried to touch on a number of the issues that we know have been a priority for your community. We wanted to highlight some of the areas where we've been able to intervene and have some positive actions. I wanted to make sure that you had contact information for Ara, my constituent services rep, that you met Ara if you hadn't already, and you met April, her boss, who is in charge of all of my constituent services deputies. So on homelessness, on the illegal cannabis dispensaries, which is such a tough issue countywide. Thanks to the voters, we are now moving in the direction of hopefully being empowered to reduce the number of illegal dispensaries by creating a path towards licensure. Getting them closed down and keeping them closed down is a challenge the DA will acknowledge, law enforcement will acknowledge, because they are so heavily resourced. They've got such good money that they shut down in one spot and pop up in another. I hear from landlords who say, when you come and you offer me, we're coming out of COVID, and I have a tenant that's offering me 2 years rent upfront cash. And so it really is this catch-22 in terms of trying to shut them down permanently while the county navigates its way through the licensure process. So I think we give you contact information on where to report illegal dispensaries. We give you information. So street vending, the county in this last year created a couple of new departments. So vending has transitioned from public health to our new Department of Economic Opportunity. We've given you contact information there so you know who to call if you have questions or concerns about a street vendor in your community. Ara, did I miss anything before I open it up for questions?
And you were going to read some of the questions?
I think the supervisor touched upon
Okay.
many of the questions that we have.
Anything that you wanted me to touch on that I didn't, from your perspective? If not, we'll go ahead and open it up, and if something comes to you, just flag it for me, Ara, let me know. But again, I wanted to give you paper. We don't usually print so much. But because you had specific questions, I wanted you to be able to see and take with you and share with a neighbor, please. Some of these contact numbers, some of the actions we've taken, so you would have a ready reference, as well as contact information, my website. The top question I get asked, Kenny Hahn used to send me a newsletter. I said, well, the county hadn't sent newsletters since Kenny Hahn was supervisor, which was about 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
We don't have the mail budget anymore. But we do have a very dynamic website in multiple languages, I'm proud to say. And so mitchell.lacounty.gov is a place you can go to find my entire staff list. If you have a particular policy issue you're interested in, you will see a picture, email address, and county cell number for all of my team. So you can find the right staffer if it's a policy issue beyond your community concerns. You can find the staff. And like I said, it's a dynamic website that we keep current with motions we've introduced and everything we're doing on behalf of the 2nd District. Eddie?
So, yeah, we
Oh, sorry. I think green space. Can you touch on green space, please?
So in
Thank you.
the walking path,
No. The need for.
I think just
the need for green
the
space.
need for green space
Yes.
and shade.
And shade. I did a tour of the 2nd District via helicopter right before the pandemic. And it is so striking from the air when you just see the different communities based on tree canopy and based on green space. And so we are working very hard with Park and Rec. We have gotten very creative in my service on the Metro Board. We've gotten very creative in terms of our interpretation of the appropriate use of ARPA dollars, and green space is an area that we're focused on. I know that there's a parcel that my predecessor had looked into. We've done the same, and there was no interest in selling. So I would ask that you work collaboratively with me. If there are parcels, we are very interested in doing all that we can to expand green space and expand tree canopy. Been working with Metro along the Vermont corridor and really thinking about creative ways to green the 2nd District, because it is probably has the least amount of green space than any of the 5 districts. And so I am sensitive to that and something that we're going to focus on.
So how are you gonna do that with the cutback on the water, and our water shortage?
Well, we have to be creative about what we mean by green space. And so, for example, the Magic Johnson Park is in the district, and they have now one of the nationally recognized, the lake there, the filtration system is one of the nationally recognized systems in a county park of that size, a regional park of that size. So we just have to be smart and talk about groundwater and talk about the planting of local plants that won't require heavy watering. We have to be smart, just like we're having to all be smart in our yards. And there's a way that can do that, and there's any number of nonprofit organizations that are partnering with county and multiple levels of government in doing that. So when I say green space, I just don't mean green lawns. There are ways in which, but we also know the value of trees in terms of the quality of our air. And so there's got to be a happy medium and a balance. But there are ways in which we can green our neighborhood without excessive use of water.
I think you'll find the community, and I'll ask, just raise your hand if you have a question, introduce yourself, and speak loudly for us. It's a small room, but your voices carry, so it should be fine. This community is, I would brag that we're rather well versed in utilization of county resources, and
Good.
via ARA, via direct contact with our partners in public works, law enforcement, even at the state level with Caltrans, because of the unique intersection where we border unincorporated city, right? We're in an unincorporated area. We border the busiest freeway, dare I say, in the world, right? Which is Caltrans owned property. So I think that those of us that have been here for a while are fairly well versed in terms of, the squeakiest wheel gets the oil, right? In
Excellent.
terms of making calls, opening tickets. And I'm sure you'll hear commentary perhaps from the audience in terms of what that experience has been, but I don't think there's an issue with follow through in terms of this community's involvement. So
Good.
I'll leave it at that, and please, questions. Maria.
I have a question. I'm almost a 15-year resident. I've been very active with the watch and getting projects like a stop sign on the street. What I feel is lacking, and it's in part by what I have been told by Department of Public Works, is there is this kind of 8 or 9 month rotation of staff. So you might get started on having a traffic study.
Rotation of staff in public works?
In Public Works, like they're assigned to this assignment and then they get assigned to something else. And so there's not consistency. Like say we say, hey, 140th and Ocean Gate for the last 15 years we've been asking for, a traffic study or traffic evaluation, because that is a very blind intersection. And in order to determine right away, and even though there's only parking on one side of the street, because our area is not flat, there's visibility issues and there's issues on the corners. It just kind of gets lost, and unless we're on top of it, it just stays lost. There have been different priorities. So, for the issue with the stop sign, the 4-way stop that I have them put into place, that took 4 years. And that took collaboration with the CHP, because I had provided dates of when traffic collisions had occurred. Miraculously, they disappeared. The one person didn't hand it over to the other person, so there was a lot of lost information and a lot of work that I had to do as a resident that, because I'm a resident, I care about my community.
Of course.
I did it,
Right.
but it's not my job.
I agree. So let me say this. I have to say, coming from the state, my direct staff is about 43, 44. And I built the staff during COVID. Folks had been hired, were on staff 3 months before we even saw each other in person. It's a very interesting onboarding process. Some came with me from the state. Some were long-term kind of county, worked in county land. Some with my predecessor, and some kind of from the outside in, community stakeholders, subject matter experts. We've got a nice kind of healthy blend. And my state people said, when we were at the state, you'd call DMV, EDD, there was a legislative liaison, and we got action. And I'm not kind of feeling that with some of these county departments. So it was kind of an interesting culture adjustment for us. So Public Works was probably my department that, trial by fire, thanks to the channel, Dominguez channel, and the odor situation that
More
was
people, yeah.
OMG. And so the director of public works and I got to know each other very fast and pretty well. And my transit deputy, if you make a note, Lily O'Brien, Lily O, because we have 2 Lilies on staff, and I have had to work really closely with Public Works because we discovered this Vision Zero plan that had been passed by the board a year or 2 before I got there that prioritized certain intersections to create, that focused on safety. The 2nd district has the highest number of, vehicular accidents and loss of life. So we were looking at the list that had been prioritized in Vision Zero plan and then realized that none of the work had begun. So we put our foot on the proverbial accelerator to really push Department of Public Works to give us a timeline and to tell us the projects that will be prioritized. So I would ask that you call Lily and make Lily your best friend and talk to her about where they are on Vision Zero if the intersection you talked about was identified as a top priority in the 2nd district. I don't know them all offhand, but Lily could tell you.
I will tell you that we have had a significant issue, and actually all of them are part of your district. The intersection of Aviation and Rosecrans. There has been, what I've been told, vandalism to some of the boxes that control the electric paneling for the signal.
Okay.
If you count all the lanes, there have been a couple of times within the last recent months that all the lights are out, they're flashing, so it would indicate a 4-way stop, or they've been completely out. So when you have 8 or 10 lanes of traffic trying to cross and nobody is, they're
directing
like, oh, no.
right.
They're,
Recipe for disaster.
El Segundo,
Right.
Manhattan Beach. No, everybody says, no, you gotta talk to the county.
Got it.
And then, the CHP says, my hands are tied because it's not our jurisdiction.
Right.
The traffic signals are the jurisdiction of the county because it's between municipalities.
Yes. So we just experienced that with that horrific accident at the intersection of La Brea and Slauson. Same scenario. After the accident, Highway Patrol leaves because they have a job to do, they clear it, and the signal light is out for 24 hours. Department of Public Works, really? So please call Lily, because as you enter a ticket, we want to know. But I want you to talk to Lily so she can tell you the priority intersections in Vision Zero for the 2nd district and the time frame that they have committed to us to get the work done.
So I know that there's a South Bay City Council of Governments. Do you have representation within the South Bay City Council of Governments? Because would that be the place to talk about that, because it is within the South Bay?
I think the first place to talk about it is with us and Public Works and this Vision Zero plan and these identified intersections that they have the data already and that they know that they are problematic areas, and understanding who's going to get the work done and by when. I'd start there. Vision Zero was a plan. Have her send you if you're not familiar with it, have her give you the information on Vision Zero. It was a plan that Public Works brought forward and again passed by the board a number of years ago. And so what's often frustrating to me as a policymaker is, we pass a motion and then the follow through doesn't happen. That's not our orientation as an office. We will continue to follow up to make sure that what we intended by the motion actually manifests. So us discovering that the work on Vision Zero hadn't happened was disconcerting, and we're working very closely with Public Works to make sure that those areas in the 2nd district that are disproportionately impacted get addressed.
Thank you.
So I appreciate Lily O'Brien.
Thank you.
So Maria,
Yes.
we've been communicating with email, right, with Eddie. Feel free to loop me in, and I know we discussed different projects in the community, but particular ones that you just mentioned right now, we can go over it together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes.
Well, this question be kind of twofold, because I'm not,
Would you mind telling me your name?
Bob.
Bob, thank you.
Who would be our city council members and mayor?
Me,
You,
if you live in unincorporated LA County.
correct.
So, Hilda Solis and I probably have the largest square miles unincorporated communities in LA County. There are 88 cities in LA County and 150 or more unincorporated communities. And so when you're unincorporated, your local government is the Board of Supervisors. So you don't have a council and a mayor, because we are the Board of Supervisors, and we're both executive and legislative. So there's no mayor of the county. So
Okay,
it's the five of us.
So then that leads me to what I understand as, the mayor, I guess, intervenes and has discussion with you many times on proposals and things, but has the power to approve or veto anything. Is that true?
The mayor of the city of whatever, wherever.
Los Angeles.
Okay,
Which gonna be Karen Bass. Okay.
sure.
Does she
Has,
have-
well, you know, there are 88 cities within LA County. And so I used to tease Mayor Garcetti. I said, no, I know LA City thinks they're the prettiest girl in the room, but I got 87 others that think that they're top contenders. And so as the Board of Supervisors, we're dealing with 88 cities. So that's why those regional entities are very important, where the South Bay cities, the coastal community cities can come together to have conversations around transit and housing, to have regional conversations. And so the mayor, and LA City is a weak mayor system. You know, there's a council, city council, there's a president of the city council. And so, you know, the mayor issues a budget, much like the governor does, but it has to be passed by the city council. So those are considered kind of weak mayor systems. But the mayor can't veto any actions taken by the Board of Supervisors. And so, you know, we have, there are council district 8, 9, 10, 14, piece of 5. Those are all LA City council districts that are contained within my supervisorial district. So there's lots of collaboration. Mayor-elect Bass and I met Monday evening in my office, talking about her first 100 days and collaborating on a particular area within the city around the unhoused, an encampment that we're gonna pull county resources in to try to address within her first week in office. So there's collaboration, but there's not veto power or authority.
Because what led me to this question was, I guess, the media focus on the mayor race this year, and we not being able to participate in it.
Right.
The incorporators.
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, well, don't they have some say in what goes on in our city? No?
If you are in unincorporated, you are not within the city of LA. Just like if you're in the city of Hawthorne or the city of El Segundo or Manhattan Beach, those are different cities.
Sure.
You know, like I said, LA likes to think they're the prettiest girl in the room. It is a city of 4 million of our 10 million LA County residents. So it really is more collaboration. And the article I referenced in terms of today's LA Times, I thought succinctly talked about the power of the Board of Supervisors in a way that you rarely hear. I think people understand a mayor, understand a governor, and this level of government just isn't as well known. But my interest in serving in the county, when I think about the county department, the departments that are within the county, public health, mental health, sheriff, probation, Department of Social Services, Department of Child and Family Services. So anything having to do with Department of Aging, anything having to do with, you know, the safety of children, the safety of seniors, our public health system. You know, people didn't understand the role of the county. COVID hit. Everybody who knew who Dr. Barbara Ferrer was. right? She was calling the shots for LA County. And so I think that now there's a broader understanding of the role and function of county government, but those are critical departments and functions that the county serves that the city does not have.
And just to kind of broaden that, maybe you can speak to the Office of Unincorporated Areas that also supports these areas in terms of the fiscal oversight and things like that as well.
And your name?
Shabonda, Christmas.
Nice to meet you. So there is an Office of Unincorporated Community Areas that I personally haven't worked closely with. April or Ara might be able to weigh in, because quite frankly, I would hope that there was more direct engagement and activity. And I've not felt that yet. And maybe that's on me, because I'm still the newbie on the board. But when I heard that name, my assumption in terms of their function was more than I think that I've understood it to be. And like I said, that could be on me. Maybe I need to do more homework on it. Ara or April, do you have any different experience with the office than I've had?
I was answering something. Can you repeat the question on it?
I can't hear you.
Can you give me the context?
Oh,
of the question?
she was asking about the Office of Unincorporated.
Areas. It's in the Chief Executive Office.
Yeah.
And that branch has been there for some time, really dedicated to all of the unincorporated, like you said, there's over 150, there's a large number, but they do specifically answer calls related to these areas, and it's some random oversight of like things like television permits in these areas and things like that.
So see, and so that goes to show you that we get the constituent calls from people who live in unincorporated areas in the 2nd District. And that is up to my constituent services staff to respond to and handle. We've not gotten the sense that they are there to support us in any meaningful way in terms of responding to constituents. Again, that's not my experience.
I can connect with her. I'm not exactly sure of which office she's talking about.
Yeah,
but,
so
yeah,
like I said,
my
maybe
perspective.
that's on us, that we haven't asked the right question. But in my orientation and onboarding to the county, it wasn't presented as a support to us in our effort to support our unincorporated communities. I've got constituent services staff who are responding to calls from unincorporated areas. So, we're clear that we're front line.
And it may be some reorganization since I had interaction with that office, but they did definitely support providing background information. I'm leading some of the petitions that we've had in this area for school district reorganization, and they provided some additional information for us, but that was several years back.
Gotcha.
Then can you remind me like the department name or commission name? Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Which
It's the
agency
Chief
is it?
Executive Office, Office of Unincorporated Areas.
Chief Executive
So it may have
Office.
been.
Yes, Sonia has mentioned them to me, but not in the context that
Okay,
it
I
was
don't think
somebody we could.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's in the CEO's office.
Yeah,
So
I don't
we'll
think
check
we
it out.
actively work with them, but I can look into more
Mhm.
information and connect with you.
Yes.
Hi, I want to bring up the marijuana dispensary.
Uh-huh.
What's your name?
Tim Price.
Yes, Tim.
Specifically in our community, where there's one that's been here for years now, and it's been a cat and mouse game. Some of the uniqueness about this place has been the original location. The dispensary owned the property. They came in and they bought it, and it's a little typical old building. Had a couple of small businesses downstairs, families upstairs. Families got chased out eventually. The local businesses, community businesses that were downstairs, they eventually had to leave. They moved the dispensary in, and the blight that brings is just absolutely unimaginable. If you live close, we live close to it. So it's unimaginable what that does to a community. So the uniqueness there, working with the county and the DA, and they closed one down that was up the street, took several years, they got it to go. This guy, just when it seems we were closing in to maybe get rid of him, moved half a block away in the shopping center. Now rents or leases the place. So he's one of those. So the old property is abandoned, derelict.
Now even worse.
It's permanent blight now,
Mhm.
right? And it is perpetual issues with, they go on, homelessness, the graffiti, the attraction of whatever that might want to camp out there or take it over, whatever. It just is more blight in the community. And then the drugs that are sold on the streets around it, because when people can't get what they want or they can't afford what they're selling, drug activity that brings gang activity, that brings, it's just perpetual. There's I call it a head shop, a paraphernalia shop that's there. I hear they sell illegal things because they're not making enough money there. Then what moves in is I don't know what you call them. I call them a speakeasy. I don't know what they call them anymore. But it's an illegal club with women and drugs and alcohol, and they're typically run by local gangs that are run by MA, and it's not just here, but this is what's been brought to the community from that, and it's just out of control. So we're doing what we can to address this thing. Of course, everybody wants to see more because of the problems it brings our community as a whole. It's horrible. Horrible for family, horrible for anybody. Nobody even wants to go down that way unless you're there to buy dope.
Right.
It seems like we're moving in a direction that we're going to legalize dispensaries eventually.
So with the passage of Measure C, the voters
Right, correct.
made that declaration.
Correct. So, my concern is when that comes and how we draft these places
The
and where they
ordinances.
can be. And with the experience that we have with this, I mean, there was a shooting there too. I mean, it goes and goes and goes. What do we do about it? You know, they shouldn't be in any kind of residential area at all.
So from my perspective, I think there's pros and cons to LA County being late. We see the city of LA, how they rolled it out. I've not found one person that thinks LA City did it right. And
I've
so I
seen some
think
of them.
that, right, I think that there are lots of lessons to be learned about how municipalities across the state have rolled out the licensure process, how many can be located in so many square miles, all that kind of stuff. LA County has an Office of Cannabis Management, and ARA has reached out to them to have them come make a presentation to you, to walk you through where they are in the ordinance process, and for you to provide input. Part of their process is to seek community input into how LA County operationalizes the passage of the measure. So, the value, from my perspective, in legalization and passing these ordinances is then government can play a role in identifying zoning areas and locations. Government can also play a role in guaranteeing the integrity of the product and the safety of the product sold, given what we're experiencing with drugs laced with other things that are taking people out left and right all over this county. Just overwhelming rates. Not just kids, people of all ages. And so that's the value, I think, of government being involved. And you, as residents, being able to provide input. So I don't know if there's a date yet, or if you've communicated yet with setting a date.
I know that she has.
But I think that will be an important meeting and an opportunity for you to express your experience directly to this Office of Cannabis Management as LA County rolls out their plans.
Right. And as we neighbor Hawthorne, they've had several open up in their city. They're closed within weeks. Weeks. I'm not sure what how they're doing it exactly. I think law enforcement, code enforcement is extremely active, and when it's a rental or lease situation, they go after the owner.
Interesting. Well, now that is also happening in LA County, because I've heard from property owners who are complaining, who are being held accountable
Sure.
in LA City and in unincorporated areas, who are like, hey, it was COVID. I rented to this person. They told me, literally, this is the conversation I had. Told me they were selling orchids. My business was shut down. It's a shoe repair place that I go to personally.
Yeah.
Told me they sold orchids. They brought orchids. I saw orchids in the window. I was closed down because of COVID, so I didn't see the traffic that was coming in and out. And now I'm being held accountable because there was a raid. They've been shut down, and I'm being held accountable and liable for having known the business they were engaging in. So we've got to find a balance for those property owners who are aware and intentional, and those who may not have been. How do we create a sense of balance? And so the right people are being pursued, and the businesses are shut down within a reasonable time frame. But we hear it from law enforcement, we hear it from the district attorney's office, that quite frankly, you know, the size and magnitude of LA County and our unincorporated areas, that, you know, we've been overwhelmed.
Right. No, I understand.
Mhm.
But this has been a problem, and I don't know how it's different anywhere else. I really don't. I know they are a problem. Place has been here for 5 years.
So we will follow up. You give R the specific address. So now the issue.
3701.
Yeah, county council's aware of it.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Because the challenge now that even if they own it outright, but they've moved, so like now what do we do with the property that's blighted?
Correct.
It falls into the other category of
Correct.
how do we hold property owners accountable to
Correct.
maintaining the integrity and the facades of their property. So now it's not even a cannabis issue. It's just a
Both. Because
negligent.
now he owns the building still. but-
That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, the building that he owns that is now empty and blighted.
Correct.
That's a different issue than him moving on and being a renter and running an illegal cannabis
Correct.
operation. But now it's shifted to, you've got a blighted property.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got a question.
Craig?
My
William,
name
sir?
is Craig.
Hi, Craig.
I noticed driving on Aviation down by Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, the soccer field there, it looks like they've torn up all the grass and they're putting in artificial turf for water saving. Now, is that being done anyplace else?
Is that a county soccer field?
No, I don't
City
believe
of
so.
Redondo.
City of-
Oh, okay.
They're replacing the turf.
Yeah.
It was
It
replacing
was
turf
turf.
already.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Been that way for probably 5 years.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that might not be going on any other place in the district as far as for water saving.
Park and Rec, in terms of county operated facilities and parks and open space, all kinds of creative things are going on. And even with our golf courses, you know, I don't know how many of you are golfers. I am. I get very irritated when I'm in Palm Desert and those greens are green. Like, you know, we're doing our part. Come on, Palm Desert. Particularly the golf courses that the county still operates are being very strategic in terms of water usage. And so I think LA County has done better than most in areas across the state in terms of really taking conservation seriously.
Yeah, a friend of mine and I were, excuse me, were joking a few days ago because of all the rains and flooding that they've got back in the Midwest. Why don't we send 1,000 tanker trucks back there?
Just
Bring the water
truck it
out,
in. Isn't that the
Exactly.
truth?
filter it. It's not good for consumption, but you can use it for watering.
Well, we've certainly done that from Northern California for many years, which always caused great, you know, consternation with my colleagues from Northern California when I was in the state legislature about, you know, LA taking all their water. You're right.
Well, these guys
Gotta
want to get
figure
rid
it
of
out.
it.
Right, exactly. You know, help us, Mother Nature.
I have another question
Yes.
about the new vending issue that we're gonna address these vendors with.
Mhm.
How exactly is that gonna work with, when we make a complaint to the concierge and they receive the complaint, what happens after that? What's the process that
That's a
takes
good
place?
question, and that's a level of detail I do not know.
Yeah, because they're
I
not
don't-
law enforcement, right?
Mhm.
They don't do enforcement levels. I mean, what good are they?
And the concierge is in the Office of Economic Development?
I guess, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they should respond to you in 48 hours. So on the third business day, if they don't respond, then you can reach out to me.
But the question is really, what's the response?
What's
So
the enforcement? What is the,
what are they gonna do? So you call the concierge and report it. My assumption is that they are more of a triage, that they will then figure out how to route it to the appropriate law enforcement if it meets if it meets that criteria,
Right.
that law
What is-
enforcement needs to
what
be
is that
involved.
criteria, right?
Well,
I mean, what are the rules now? What are the guidelines, right? So, it's always been, you can't do it in a residential area, and yet we've had recent issues
Yeah.
with them setting up right in the middle of the neighborhood.
Oh, the guy on 135th?
Yeah.
So,
And so have you called the concierge to,
no.
have you done that
Before we knew
process?
about that, we spoke to the local sheriffs, and they came out and they spoke with him, and
then they'd
I don't
leave?
think he had any permits or something, and he left, I believe,
So
so.
I called
Code enforcement.
public health department
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so did I, yeah.
to complain,
Mhm.
and I cited county code saying, hey, listen, there's no
Mhm.
unpermitted food vending on public highways.
Mhm.
I cited the code. Our got corrective, but the answer to the constituent was the second district isn't enforcing unpermitted food vendors. This was the literal response, and I said, "What?" Of course, I immediately picked up the phone and called. I said, "What's going on? What do you mean? Why the second district of all? You know?" And so, just so you know, they're not giving you a good name, right? Just on the first phone call. So I don't know what happened after that.
Eddie, thank you so much for that. And in the past, Department of Public Health has been dealing with it. And for that particular answer, they shouldn't have answered that way. I checked with my colleague Pamela, who handles it, and she has contacted them. They shouldn't have answered like that at all. And right now, we're going through major transitions on who will be responsible for street vending. And it used to be public health, but it's moving on to economic opportunity. And even now, they're trying to solidify ordinances according to the new state bill. That has been taking time, unfortunately. But if you have any inquiries, you can use the concierge, which is still new. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. And just like I assisted Eddie, I can help you guys.
Well, I appreciate you because I'm clear what my job is and isn't, and enforcement is not a part of it. So I'm not.
No, I knew that wasn't right when I heard it. Why would she exclude this? Don't enforce the second district.
Exactly.
So,
Curious.
Has there ever been thought? And Maria mentioned the South Bay Council of Governments
Mhm.
organization, but has there ever been thought of giving? And this is nothing to say about the relationship that we have with the deputies for constituent engagement,
Of course.
but of representation for communities that are trying to identify and get. We've tried for example to. Even getting county labeling and identifying ourselves as Wiseburn was a real challenge with my predecessors. Not even the board that I have today. The folks that have been here for over 20 years. How do we get ourselves recognized? Like we want an urban planning exercise for our area in terms of traffic, right? All the mapping applications route all the traffic through our community, right? And we're surrounded by billion-dollar corporations, right? And if I took some pictures, some of these people would not be employed at their, that they can do all the ESG work as a corporation, but their drivers are going to kill one of my children walking to school one of these days. How do we get that? Has there ever been thought about the supervisors in terms of forming a local council, some form of getting a voice from the community? That voice is for the community, in addition to the supervisors, constituent, deputies for constituent engagement, which serve multiple areas, right?
Completely fair question. And I think there are a number of ways to respond. First of all, the county charter said there will be 5. Well, the foremothers and forefathers that established LA County never envisioned 10 million.
Agreed.
They just didn't. And so there have been multiple ballot measures to expand the board, and the voters defeat them significantly every time. My assumption is that voters assume, more money, more bodies, more staff. So they say thumbs down. But there really is a question of, can an individual represent 2 million people? As just the second district alone, my district is bigger than all but 7 states, 7 governors across the country. So it's massive. It is massive. So some would argue the board needs to be expanded. When I was in the legislature, there were several bills to expand the board. I didn't support them, not because I don't believe the board should be expanded. I didn't support the language in that legislation. I don't remember when the issues were on the ballot, because I don't honestly remember how I voted, but I was surprised when I looked at the number of times it's been before the voters and it's failed. We've had community groups, just my first year, I think, on the board, who said, we want neighborhood councils like the city of LA. And I began to talk to my colleagues and could get 0 traction. I'm not really sure why. It does have budget implications. The city, funds the neighborhood councils. They all have budgets, and it's not, small amount. So I know it has budget implications. My new colleague was reported, may have been before the election, about her interest in expanding the size of the board. So I think that there will probably be new energy around addressing that very question. We have some unincorporated communities in the second district who've begun to express interest around annexation, about either being annexed into an existing city. That's an arduous, long process, because I've served on the LAFCO board that's responsible for doing that my first year. So I think there are a variety of ways in which that can happen. What we are trying to do in the meantime is, I am constituent services oriented. That's how I was brought up. I was a 22-year-old young staffer to then State Senator Diane Watson, who made sure we understood in the district office. I know everybody thinks public policy making in the Capitol is exciting and sexy, but constituent services is what gets you reelected. And that's why I'm here, to serve the constituents. And so that's always been kind of my orientation, which is why we've built our team the way we have, where I've got multiple what we call community offices with constituent engagement team leads like Ara, who are assigned to a geographic area, so you can have an established relationship with someone. You know who to call. She knows the issues in your community. They are paired with policy deputies, because there's no policy issue that doesn't have a community connection or impact. And there's no issue you raise here tonight that doesn't have policy impact. And so they work in pods. And so there are policy deputies who work directly with ARA, like Lily, for example, to provide the policy kind of support on whatever issue comes up in the community. So that's the way we've structured our office, Team Mitchell, to really make sure that unincorporated areas have a working relationship with me, my team, and we provide all the services we can. So other than some conversations about neighborhood councils, the issue around expanding the board so the districts are smaller, I think that's what I'm hearing kind of generally that I think addresses your question. And then it's the annexation, and that kind of comes from the community up, but that is a lengthy process. Yes.
Derry Bush. Does the county fund the highway patrol at all?
No. Highway Patrol is a state agency. The county funds the sheriff.
So, because our traffic is supposed to be patrolled by the CHP. Well, you can knock me over with a feather if I ever see a CHP officer in the area.
So I don't think, I'm looking to our deputies here, I could be wrong, but I don't think that local government contributes to the CHP budget. I think that's all the state. So then the question is, how does the state determine where they allocate their resources? How does the commissioner, the head of CHP, determine where to send? But highway patrol is typically highways.
And incorporated also. Because they come to our watch meeting.
If you needed to file an accident report,
It's highway patrol. So I don't know then how they make the decision about allocation of resources, i.e., how many officers they send. That's something we have to follow up on. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
We're definitely serviced by them.
I think it's a long history between the departments. The sheriff's department in its entirety is large enough to do their traffic as well, but there's kind of a.
Oh, there's clearly
So
there's a division
So
that I get.
there's a mutual understanding kind of, hey, let us stay here, because CHP wants to have their tentacles everywhere still, right? And so they will do the traffic in the unincorporated areas, and then the sheriff traditionally, and still, they don't have a motor unit detail in the unincorporated areas, and they don't do traffic, they leave it to CHP. Many years ago, that was, there was a different disagreement between, I think it was Sherman Block maybe, and CHP, and he goes, I'll just start my motor detail. And they were not happy with that, and they said, hey, what are we doing? He goes, I'm gonna start, and we'll start getting you guys, and you don't have to be in the unincorporated areas anymore. So whatever his point was, it was heard,
Right.
and there was no motor detail, so.
But my question is, the sheriffs have, an algorithm in terms of how many sheriff deputies are in, and then, the cities that they have contractual relationships with, a part of that contract is the agreement about, how many deputies, what the man and woman power looks like. What I don't know is if indeed Highway Patrol is responsible for that, how the Highway Patrol allocates their man and woman power
Yeah, that's up to them.
by area.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting question that I'll be
That
asking.
would be.
And I can speak to some of that.
Yes,
Supervisor.
please.
Good evening, everyone. Deputy Stern, my partner, Deputy Ruiz, we're happy to be here. As far as traffic enforcement in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles, you will see deputies enforcing traffic laws as much as we can, but we don't have dedicated traffic units in the unincorporated areas. In our contracted city of Lawndale, we do have a motor deputy who his job is to solely enforce traffic laws and also take traffic collision reports. We also additionally have deputies in police cars who enforce traffic laws solely and take traffic collision reports. From my understanding, the CHP is contracted to take all traffic collision reports in unincorporated county areas and not necessarily enforce traffic laws proactively. So we have crime cars and we have traffic cars, like I said. So in the incorporated city of Lawndale, you have crime cars and also dedicated traffic cars, which you don't have, unfortunately, in unincorporated areas. Those crime cars may and do enforce traffic laws as they can, but there are usually so many calls that we must solely.
Not the priority.
Yeah, the crimes and calls for service are the priority.
Did you say that CHP does not do traffic enforcement?
To my understanding, they're not actively doing traffic enforcement on the streets in unincorporated areas, and they're mainly reactive, unfortunately. Don't quote me directly, but from my observations.
Why would that be?
That would be on them. I couldn't
So-
speak to that.
so
but
We
from
need to get
my
we need to get a clear.
observations.
I need
Yeah.
to get a clear understanding
So my
of.
But they are
experience-
contracted for traffic collisions,
Okay, my
and they will always
experience,
respond to those.
out of due respect, out of my experience, it's just the opposite. They do, but they're not coming here.
That
So
it's
it's
their
almost-
responsibility, but they're not here.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's almost like an RD, a district responsibility, right? If cars are assigned to district or areas, the guy chooses to be on the freeway all the time, then he's on the freeway all the time. Many, many years ago, there were guys at CHP that preferred to work the unincorporated areas. Some. Not a lot, but so you always saw a mix.
Right.
They were always around.
Right.
That seems to have moved away. Now, I don't know if it's a manpower issue
Mm-hmm.
or it's a cultural issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could be either or both.
Or it's a priority of the new Highway Patrol Commissioner.
It is how they
Right.
communicate that.
Exactly.
Or unaware of that and it hasn't been rectified.
So then that's what goes back to my initial question is checking with the Highway Patrol. Housed at Expo Park is the Southern Regional Commander, something, who we had a relationship with because when I was in the state Senate, they were our security detail if you needed it.
Right.
So that's why I knew them. They would do the security detail on my home and when I had threats or of my office, but they're based in Expo Park. That's where, and so we'll follow up to just ask the question about how they make the decision to allocate resources, as in man or woman power,
Sure.
unincorporated communities. We'll follow up on that. That's interesting because it could be a matter of their culture or management decisions, but it's important to know.
And talking to them individually, they say it's a manpower issue.
Yeah,
But that's at the ground level. So
Right.
I don't know.
right.
Very possibly could be.
This sounds like a safety issue that we're dealing with, and it's all fragmented.
It is. It is. Mm-hmm. Because if we were to start fresh and design how safety should be handled in unincorporated areas, the Holly Mitchell Bright idea would be the responsibility of the sheriff. And highway patrol is for the highway. That's how they were designed and created to manage multi-jurisdictional highways that cross local jurisdictions. So why they would have responsibility in unincorporated areas, I think is odd. I appreciate you sharing the history with us, but like I said, if we were to write today the way it ought to be, I wouldn't design it that way. So we'll check with the new captain for the Southern Region and ask the question, and I'll get back to you with the answer.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
So, Siobhan again. Just thinking about, my field is more health social services, and thinking about what's coming down the pike if the public health emergency ends January, maybe April. Communities like this are at risk of losing Medi-Cal, Medicaid, dual eligibles, health services. And in families where they're dependent upon one or another income maker, we're looking at families that may have to leave their homes
Tell me why you said that they'll lose their Medi-Cal.
with the redetermination process that will kick in if the public health emergency.
It just means that you'll have to go back to the old time of applying
Correct.
and reapplying.
But there seem to be a lot of barriers within that system that we aren't really sure about yet. And so I'm thinking in terms of like how the Department of Social Services, Public Social Services is responsible for that. There's a new application for that. I'm sure it's a great newer system, but it is also something that people are not familiar with. They haven't had to do this in 2 or 3 years. Some people are now on Medi-Cal and Medicaid because of COVID. So they've never done this before. And there's just some
So tell me your question.
concerns. My question is, what are the safety nets for that population?
Got it.
And how do we keep them from moving into a homeless state when we're trying to get people out of it?
So let me back up a little bit because we're talking inside baseball. Let me back up for everybody else. So in California, Medicaid, which is the government-sponsored health care system for low income, is called Medi-Cal. And to be on Medi-Cal, you have to continue, on a quarterly basis in some instances, continue to prove that you're eligible. And with COVID, where we shut down the, offices, Department of Social Services and all that, And with the emergency order at the state level, we said we just need to make sure everybody continues to get their health benefits, and we won't require you to come in and produce this paperwork to continue to apply. Well, that's going to come to an end. And the concern is, and the unfair requirement the state put on counties was, your recertification, your anniversary date was based on when you enrolled. And so we all would have different enrollment dates. And so what the state is now saying is you got to recertify kind of everybody by a date certain. Well, in LA County, that's like, 1 in 3 children in LA County are Medi-Cal recipients, and very likely so are their parents. So it's a massive number. It's going to be a massive administrative undertaking. And I think what will happen is the LA County lobbyists are going to continue to beat down the governor's door in Sacramento and talk to our state legislators to say it's impossible, we can't get it all done on this date. Unfortunately, the way most things happen, we'll get up to, right at that moment, and then they'll change the policy. But I am not, sorry, I touched the microphone. I am not concerned that we will lose people because of the recertification. LA County may be penalized from the state or the feds because we don't meet their deadline. But that's not my concern. Are there people who got healthcare services during this time and didn't have to go through the normal process and will have to learn and make those transitions? Yes. The state legislature, and I was one of those people who worked every year to simplify the process, which meant the rules were in a constant state of flux, that people had to learn them consistently. I was one of those bad actors trying to make access better. That will continue to happen, and we'll have to continue to make sure that there are nonprofit organizations and others who are educating people about how to access it. It won't be neat and perfect, but I don't have the concern that people are going to drop out of the system. I don't. A lot of new things coming from the state, CalAIM and all these things trying to, no. Now, are we complicating it right through here? Is the governor complicating it by kind of piling on new things? Absolutely. That's not new, frankly. But I'm not worried that people will drop coverage. I'm not.
I think what I've heard is there are concerns that people will drop coverage, but that they'll get it back the minute they hit an emergency room.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's a presumptive eligibility.
Absolutely.
To put them back in.
Well, that's the backstop. That's not ideal.
That's not the ideal.
No, it's not ideal. That's not ideal. I think that the more important issue right now, having spent my morning at Martin Luther King Community Hospital, the more important issue is making Medi-Cal truly viable by having reimbursement rates so doctors will accept it. The issue is not keeping people in the program. It's making sure people have a doctor to go to. That's my concern. Woo, sorry.
Any questions from the library? Okay.
I have more.
Going back to the
What the
homeless,
host team is?
Yeah.
do you guys have a handle on how many of the homeless are mental versus hard luck times?
Excellent question. And every report you read from it will vary. The last point in time count, which is just that, it's a point in time. It's a 3 or 4 nights where people do the counting, and somebody could lose their house in the very next week. And so I always think that count is it's an undercount, right? And so the most kind of reliable number I've seen consistently is about a 10% number. Now the reality is the homeless we see, who are, those walking around naked in the intersection, those are the ones that are suffering from severe mental illness. The vast majority of the unhoused we don't see, quite frankly, because they're sleeping in cars, they're in shelters, they are managing. they are the homeless who have jobs, who go to work every day and can't afford housing in LA County. So while 10% sounds like a small number, they are the majority of the unhoused we see who are living on the street.
So the 10% is the mental?
The,
Okay.
the severely mental ill.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know, those who the governor, and I fully supported and voted accordingly when I was in the legislature, those who I cannot remember the actual technical term, but it's people who are beyond able to make decisions for themselves. And with the current laws, you know, we can't remand them or hold them beyond 72 hours against their will. And so it's this horrific catch-22 where we see people on the street who we know need intervention and help, but government isn't empowered to hold them against their will. And so the governor has put forward this concept around care court that will allow, in certain instances, government to intervene and pull people off the street and put them in safe places to receive medical treatment and mental health treatment, because that's what they need, even though they don't have the capacity to make that decision, quite frankly, for themselves. And it's highly controversial. The mental health advocacy community is somewhat divided. The community that advocates on behalf of those with developmental disabilities tend to be stronger, expressing their concern about overstepping the current law that, you know, in effect shut down the horrible state mental health hospitals, and required and created the new law that says, you know, the least restrictive environment is what's best. And so, unfortunately, that's created the scenario where even family members aren't able to remand the family member to a facility if they don't choose to go. So it's tricky. Nothing, when I first ran for office in 2010, my son, who's now 22, was 10. And so you can imagine explaining to a 10-year-old why I was choosing to really disrupt our lives by running for public office. You know, I'm a single adoptive parent. And so he ended up going to middle school and high school in Sacramento, because you're there Monday through Thursday. So this, you know, I had to convince him that this was a good idea for our family. And he understood it in a profound way. And was like, you know, none of this is really black and white. You know, most of this is really kind of in the middle. And I said, that's what makes it so hard. And that's what makes the answers to all the questions you've all raised. Sometimes there's no hard and fast. It's process that takes too long. It's resource allocations. How do we prioritize one issue over another? It's tricky, but it's what gets me up every morning and to the Hall of Administration to work with my colleagues to roll up our sleeves and do our best to try to figure it out.
And thank you for that.
Indeed. Thank
I
you for that.
appreciate you all.
Any last questions? I just want to make sure I have a visual on everybody, that everybody got a chance to ask.
I just have a simple one. What's a host team? What are you guys part of the
Homeless
host
Outreach Services Team.
team? Is that what you guys do?
Once again?
Homeless Outreach Services Team. So what that does is, say there's an encampment in your neighborhood, and it has to be three or more homeless individuals. You can report it to the host team. And it's not just they call us and then we go kick everybody out. Right? So it's a process. So I believe they have to post notifications around the encampment, and it takes, I think, about up to a month for the removal process to take place. And then eventually the homeless services outreach team will go and remove them and take down the encampment.
And what happens within that month, if I may interject, is multiple contacts with the unhoused individual to try to get them housed.
Right.
So
Offering
when
them
you get
temporary housing.
Yes.
And they
Right.
work very closely with the county Department of Mental Health and the
Mhm.
housing authorities, and
Mhm.
it's a very thorough process and a thoughtful process.
It is. And humane process, I would
Humane
argue.
process, yes.
It's a very collaborative.
Mhm.
And so it's not just you call, they come and remove all their belongings the next day. It really is an integrated approach to try to really solve for the problem. Because, you know, when I would get calls when I was at the state from folks who wanted people removed from freeway entrances and exits, and so my response was, and where will we be taking them? Because it's not about just sweeping their belongings. It's about solving for the problem.
We're pushing them across borders into.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's why, you know, when you hear 30 days, like, but you know, when you go out with the host teams, as I have done, or the nonprofit organizations that are doing the work in terms of the placement, I get it. If I'm in my home, as I define it, and a perfect stranger walks up to me and says, so, you know, I'm Holly, and, you know, what are your needs? It takes multiple contacts to relationship build and have a sense of trust. And for me to then be comfortable enough to tell you what my real needs are. I'm a victim of domestic violence. I hear voices. Whatever the case may be, to really try to make sure that the appropriate county agencies and departments are engaged to try to provide them meaningful, relevant support. Because the second goal is to not create this constant cycle. You place me someplace, it doesn't work for me if I'm paranoid schizophrenic and you want me in a shelter, in a dormitory setting, where there are voices and noises and things I can't control that trigger me. That's not helpful. I'm going to leave and be back in an encampment. And I've spent time with the women at the Downtown Women's Center and heard these stories. And I thought, that makes perfect sense. So figuring out how to house people in a place that meets their true needs is the goal. And unfortunately, it takes time to establish those relationships, the trust. Like you said, it doesn't help like in Public Works if a different person gets assigned. If you and I have had conversations once a week for 2 or 3 weeks and then somebody else shows up, we have to start all over again. So that's
Right, I wanna-
the incredibly important work that the host team does.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. I want to add that I talked to my colleague recently, Lily Sofiani, and she mentioned that currently, because of the pandemic, we have over 200 encampments, and the host team, they work with CEO's office, DMH, local service providers, and the wait can take few months or more, depending on where the site is, and because there's such a long wait list right now, and the reason why, you know, some of the team cannot go right away is because when public works staff go, local service providers go, the host team accompanies them for their safety and what have you, so it just takes a long time to coordinate. So some sites, it might take more than 1 month, so I just wanted to.
That's true.
Yeah.
It varies. Yes.
I had a question regarding the homeless. So what if they decide that they want to create an encampment in your front setback? What's the process then? Does it take 30 days to have them removed?
Setback is
On your property,
On your
in
property.
front of your
If
home?
it's trespassing, you can enforce that.
Okay,
So when you say,
because I've heard different.
so when you say setback, help me understand what that
Your
is.
front yard.
Like literally on your
In-
front
on
yard.
your front yard, yeah. I've seen encampments where they start encroaching, they're on the sidewalk,
And then it.
then they move into the
Yeah,
front
I
yard.
agree. That's trespassing.
And not only that, if it's sidewalk, if it's blocking a public, if it's obstructing a public way, there are ways that we can deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have a question.
So-
You-
Sorry, is this a question for law enforcement? Or-
Yes,
Okay. All right.
you guys go and there's an encampment, go and talk to them. Tell me you got 30 days to move. Day 29, they move 4 blocks away. Does that time start again?
No, I'm not, neither one of us is a member of the homeless outreach
Mhm.
team. But to my knowledge, and it's a grim way of thinking of it, but if they were to, they could come back to the same spot, and I believe it would start over. I'm not positive.
So in other words, it doesn't work.
Right.
No, that's not
It-
true.
it-
I
it
wouldn't say it
does.
doesn't work. I
It
wouldn't say
doesn't.
it doesn't work. And I'll tell you why. My earlier point. The point of the interaction for 30 days is to get them placed. Now, the challenge we're having is, so we house you. And he moves in the next day. That is a challenge. And that we are trying to figure out. My conversation with Mary Lett Bass was to talk about how to create physical impediments to people kind of reestablishing encampments. And there are different communities and different ideas about how to do that in terms of building community gardens, communities kind of reclaiming that public space. But if our efforts to put people in housing work, then the issue is not them coming back to that same spot, but somebody else backfilling. And the issue is we have to build housing. LA County is 500,000 housing units short of what we need based on today's population.
People can move out.
Well, I'm a
Simple.
third generation Native Angelino, so I would argue that I might have squatting rights more so than somebody else.
No, you
I guess
don't.
they could. I don't.
No.
Okay.
Americans have the rights are Native Americans. who got
True.
Screwed over.
True. So
Time
so
and time again.
okay. So then, if we only allowed the natives to stay, then our population would be way less than 10 million.
Yep.
A whole bunch of us would have to go. So we have to figure out who can stay and who can't. In the meantime, based on the 10 million population and the current housing stock, and the reality is, housing development hasn't kept up for a variety of reasons. We have to build more. We just have to build more. Not just LA County, all over the state, all over the country. The population has grown. So, you can be the decider of who gets to stay and not. In my current position, I'm going to try to make sure that we create opportunities to build across the spectrum. Affordable, starter homes. We have not kept pace with building as we should. And that's not just like the county's responsibility, that's just kind of across the board in terms of developers and everything. Thank you, Betty, for the invitation. I appreciate it.
I just want to say on an ending note, I'm going to take a moment to, first of all, thank the supervisor for coming out to
Thanks
our
for having me.
square mile.
Thanks for having me.
Under 8,000 population community and talking to us. This is huge.
That's what I'm supposed to do.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you. We appreciate you. I appreciate you guys for showing up and
Yes.
asking the questions
I
for our
agree.
community. I appreciate our local library for hosting us this evening as well. Thank you guys. You're what makes living in this community worth it. You're, our mayor, our executor, our legislator. So we'll use the resources that we have here, your deputies, and thank you, April and Ara as well.
And April and Ara's contact information is in this. And I would ask you that if you have a neighbor that didn't show up today, we've got plenty there. These packets are specific to questions impacting this community. So please take one and give one to your neighbor on the left, the neighbor on the right, and across
I'll
the street.
scan them and email them out as well.
Fabulous. Beautiful. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays, Supervisor.